and welcome to this evening's Breaking the Chain. We're broadcasting live globally tonight, and tonight we are going to cover go, no-go weather decisions with Fox News 6 Chief Meteorologist J.P. Dice. This is an FAA Wings credited event. As some of you may know, the objective of the Wings program is to address the primary accident factors that continue to plague general aviation. By focusing on this objective, we hope to reduce the number of accidents we see each year for the same causes. And it's not about an awards program, but it's a true pilot proficiency program. And the sole purpose of the Wings program is to reduce accident trends and save lives. If you aren't already a participant of the Wings program, please follow that link right there and sign up, and you can get notification of webinars and seminars throughout your local area so that you can become more proficient. My name is Jeremy Walters. That's my contact information there. I'm lead FAST team representative in the San Antonio FSDO, and the gentleman below me is on that same block is Ryan Newman, and Ryan is the FAST team program manager at the San Antonio FSDO. If you have any comments or concerns or questions how we can improve this program, by all means, please feel free to reach out to Ryan. As I just said, my name is Jeremy Walters, and I'm a professional flight instructor, ATP airplane, commercial pilot helicopter, working on my ATP helicopter right now as we speak, Gold Seal flight instructor, and I'm a commissioned officer in the United States Army Reserves. I enjoy giving back, and that's what this program is about. I was a former 864 pilot in the Army, and as I mentioned before, I'm a lead FAST team representative. I have a commissioned officer mindset and vision, and that is to lead and influence and help improve everything that I'm assigned to do. And I chose to take on this voluntary role to help lead our community of pilots into a safer direction. I couldn't do any of this without the support of my beloved family. That is my wife, Talia, who's also in aviation, and our 4 kids, and not shown here was our newest addition that came to us July of last year, baby Jeremy, my youngest child, who is growing just as fast as a mustard seed. I'm assisted by Paul Nadal. Paul is an instrument-rated private pilot, and he actually is in the process of working to become a FAST team rep as we speak. Paul is a veteran in the U.S. Navy, and he is the man who makes sure that this program runs without a hitch. So what is breaking the chain? Well, many of us have heard that there is a human factors error chain that starts from the conception of an idea to go do something, and we wind up in a bad situation, just as shown. Well, our goal is to break the link of the chain, the error chain. And if we can do that, we can eliminate the accident from happening, getting us to our destination. So how do we do that? By doing exactly what we're doing, by getting pilots together to talk aviation and how to get better. That is the spirit of this program, saving lives. So tonight, we have a special guest from Fox News 6 in Birmingham, Alabama. JP is an innovator in broadcast meteorology. In 2004, he developed the first dual polarization Doppler radar used in broadcast meteorology. This is now standard for all National Weather Service radars. JP was also the first meteorologist in Alabama to earn the certified broadcast meteorologist seal from the American Meteorologists Association. Dice is also the National Weather Association broadcast chair. JP also holds an ATP airline transport pilot certificate and a flight instructor certificate. And when he's not at work, he enjoys flying his beautiful J model Mooney as shown here with his wife and family. JP also had the opportunity to fly with the Blue Angels. So that tonight is our guest speaker, Mr. JP Dice. Without further ado, JP, you now have the flight controls.
All right, I got the controls. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jeremy. And hopefully you guys can see me here. Let's go ahead and am I up here yet? Okay.
Yes, sir, you are. You are.
All right, just want to make sure you were seeing me. All right, well, I'm going to share the my screen here, and we're going to get rolling along. And we'll go ahead and put this in play mode. Anyway, a little bit about what I do. I've been doing television weather here for about 25 years. Various places in Florida, North Alabama, worked in Huntsville for a while, about 11 years, and here in Birmingham for 11 years. And always wanted to fly airplanes. First love, flying airplanes, always wanted to do that as a kid, but ended up getting into broadcasting. And then later on in life, when I had the time and the means to do it, I decided I wanted to fly airplanes. I got my private pilot certificate, but like most things that I do, I get into it 120%. So ended up getting instrument and commercial and multi-engine and flight instructor, ATP, and got deeper and deeper. I'm on airplane number 2 now. First airplane was a Piper Archer, and then I bought the Mooney. And the other things I do some corporate flying as well, and 135 charter work when time allows. So very involved in a wide variety of different kinds of airplanes. So we want to go beyond the weather briefing and really help you guys learn how to better utilize the technology that we have today. What is a little frustrating, if you go into the NTSB reports and you go back and you type in weather and aircraft fatalities or aircraft crashes in the search bar there, the list is almost endless. And back in the day when we didn't have technology as good as we do, you could understand that to a certain degree. These days, it's still happening. You see it in the forums on Facebook, you see it on the news. Another airplane has crashed, somebody with their family in bad weather, and you think, why in the world did they go into bad weather? And it leads me to think, you got a few things going on. The classic case of get there-itis. I got to get there. I've got to get to work. I've got to get to a meeting. We got to get back because of a certain event, whatever it may be, that external pressure that we talk about with risk mitigation. There's also the case of you don't know what you don't know. Do you understand the technology that you're using? Do you understand what you're getting from the weather briefings? If you're getting that brief via 1-800-WEATHER-BRIEF, the mobile app, 1-800-WEATHERBRIEF.com, or via one of the electronic flight bags like Garmin Pilot or ForeFlight. Do you understand what all of that is? And one of the things I noticed when I started flight training, and I haven't been flying that long. I fly a lot, but I haven't been flying that long, only about 10 years. And I noticed, man, we're using kind of some old school weather teaching here. That was stuff that I hadn't used in television broadcasting in ages. Old school DIFAX charts and a bunch of coded stuff that came from the era of teletypes. We got to modernize how we do this. We got to make it better. And you can do that by taking some steps on your own to learn more about the weather. One of the things, I was talking to somebody a while back, and it got me thinking, and they were looking on ForeFlight, and they had told me, well, we can't fly tomorrow because it's going to be X, Y, and Z. And I had looked at the weather, and I'm like, what are you talking about? It's going to be nice. Well, when I looked at the forecast, here's what it had. And what they were looking at is MOS, M-O-S, instead of the TAF. And I want to get into this a little bit. This is some new information that over the last couple of years they've added into ForeFlight. Many folks use ForeFlight, very common app. I use it all the time. MOS is what we call model output statistics. No human has touched MOS. It is just raw data that comes out of a model. I'm going to caution you here. Don't make go and no-go decisions based on MOS data. It can keep you on the ground, or it can lead you astray, and you may go do something that you shouldn't do. It's guidance. Use it loosely. It goes out further than the TAF information, but it is far from the gospel. Be careful with the MOS data. It is raw data, no human hands have actually touched that. The TAF is what a forecaster at your local National Weather Service office or the Weather Service office that handles the airport that you're flying out of or into has actually come up with. That's a forecast that humans have produced based on a variety of model data and their experience and education as a meteorologist. So the TAF is a much more valuable product to look at than MOS data. So I wanted to get that out there. Something that you also should be looking at, this thing called the forecast discussion, area forecast discussion. In meteorology, we call that the AFD. Click on that thing, and you're going to see a whole bunch of information there. And this really gets into the head of what the meteorologist who is writing the TAF is thinking. So it's going to give you a lot more information. Some of it's going to be a little meteorological talk, but other parts of it will give you some insight on maybe that TAF's going to change. Maybe they're looking at some aspect that may change later in the day that could impact what's going to happen in terms of thunderstorm development, or could be a wide variety. This one is really intense on the hurricane because we live here in the Birmingham area, so Hurricane Delta could impact our weather by the weekend with a good chance of rain, thunderstorms, tornado threat, breezy conditions. So a lot of information there. So my takeaway is, look at that TAF, look at the TAF of where you're going, look at the TAFs in between where you're going, look at all the METARs. If you look at the full weather discussion, you're going to see all of that. And also read, or you look at the full weather briefing, you're going to see all that, but also read that forecast discussion. Don't just graze through that. Look at the AFD, the area forecast discussion. And again, you can find that there on your weather app like ForeFlight. We've all run into the person who's like this. I was going to fly today, but it looks like the weather may go IMC. I've known folks like this, and they will cancel a trip just like that. There is a situation of being maybe perhaps a little too careful, and it's going to keep you on the ground all the time. Very few days are perfect flying days. I know here in the Southeast over the last few weeks, we've had some fantastic flying weather, but that is not typical. There's certain parts of the country where you almost get year-round beautiful weather to fly in. Most of us are not that fortunate. So that's a little joke there, the one cloud in the sky, and I've known people, well, I didn't fly today, it's a little bit cloudy. You don't necessarily want to be that cautious, because what's going to happen, you're going to be safe because you're not going to get in the air. It's just not going to happen. That's not realistic. These days are rare. This is a picture I took coming out of Florida, and that's around Crystal River, Florida. That's the power plant there. And unfortunately, we just don't see that many days unless, maybe you're out in Phoenix or Scottsdale or Tucson or something in the Southwest where you get a lot of those beautiful weather days. All right, deadly weather. 25% of all weather-related accidents. Here's the kicker. 25% of all weather-related accidents are fatal, and failure to recognize deteriorating weather conditions continue to be a frequent case for contributing factor of accidents. That's FAA data. Very serious. When I first started flying, somebody told me, said, if we can keep people from flying into bad weather, keep them from running out of gas, and keep them from stalling and spinning on base to final, we're going to eliminate most of our aviation, at least general aviation accidents. There's a lot of truth to that. I know my role here is certainly to help you eliminate the weather crashes, which continue to frustrate me. We had one a while back here that touched home to Alabama with a bonanza that was coming out of Gulf Shores, which is a coastal airport, and heading back up to North Alabama. Airplane departs and gets right into bad weather, VFR into IMC based on the NTSB preliminary. And several times the pilot had been briefed, actually got a weather briefing over the telephone, and the briefer said VFR flight is not recommended. Went anyway, had an important meeting. Get their itis, right? Fatal weather-related accident. Here's one with a Mooney a few years back, and the airplane was basically using ADSB. The pilot was using the ADSB data for tactical weather avoidance, and ended up getting into bad weather. Airplane goes out of control, and the airplane crashes, kills both people on board the airplane. Another case, this is back when I worked in Huntsville. It was a terrible weather night, big line of thunderstorms that had set up near the Huntsville International Airport. And a Cessna 206 takes off to fly to the Atlanta area and goes right into the thunderstorm. Notice injuries to fatal. That was a clear-cut case of, and not to mention, it was also at night. So you've got the factor of night. This is pre ADSB data. This is pre-XM, but you know what? With the way the weather was on that particular occasion, it was clearly visible that it was not a safe night to fly the airplane. And here's another one where it was a case of spatial disorientation with a Baron that was coming into the Birmingham airport and had to do a go around, came back in and ended up losing control of the airplane. And that particular night, it was about a 600-foot ceiling. It wasn't hard IMC, but the pilot was relatively new instrument pilot and got disoriented in the cloud. So you see the commonality here. You have case after case of weather-related accident. A few years ago, it was a severe weather day. I had gotten called in to the TV station to work that Sunday. And later in the day, in fact, it was such a bad weather day, NOAA had been flying their P-3 Orions in our area doing severe weather research. There was an airplane, it was a Cessna coming out of the Orlando area going up to Tennessee. They apparently been on a vacation. Big Squall-Line. Airplane flies right into that. A very equipped airplane, had a lot of GPS equipment, ADSB, XM, everything on board, goes right into the line of storms, and aircraft is overstressed, and we have everyone on board that airplane dies. And that's clearly one of those situations. You see that line coming, you need to have another plan. You know, I always say you have to have a plan if the weather does not work out as you intend. Do you land? Do you turn around the other way? You don't want to continue the flight into a thunderstorm. And we continue to see this happening. And to a certain degree, I think this may be happening because folks are trying to use, as much as I love it, the XM or ADSB data as a means of tactical avoidance of thunderstorms. And that's really not what it can be used for safely. And I'll explain more of that in just a moment. Who learned this way? Look at these radar summary charts. Back when I first started in TV weather, we would have printers that just like printed these things out all day long. And by the time it printed out, the radar data was old. So this is not really, those charts were kind of useful back in the day. They gave you the heights of the thunderstorms and the directions in which they were moving. It was the old DIFAX radar summary chart. Not really applicable in the modern age, but a lot of us did learn that way. Even, like I said, when I was getting my private, we were learning weather that way. Navigating around storms. So a reality of the fact is very few days are perfect, and you're going to have to navigate around weather. But you have to be able to do it safely. On the books, 20 nautical miles around a thunderstorm is the safe way to do it. We try to do that. In all cases, that's not always practical, but we try our best to do that. And one of the best tools that you have in navigating around thunderstorms is the old Ray-Ban radar, your eyes. Look out, you can see the height of the clouds, you can see the rain shafts, and you can actually pick out the thunderstorms. If you are IMC and you have thunderstorms, this always scares me to death. IMC and you've got thunderstorms, it is possible you could be in IMC conditions and go right into something and not even see it because of some of the delays with that radar data. So I really try to keep a visual on thunderstorms when I am flying in any kind of convective weather. And that's actually me. I was going from airport in Georgia back to Pell City, Alabama. And we a pretty good flight. We didn't even really have very many bumps along the way, but some beautiful cloud formations. Of course, we also have low ceilings and visibility issues. A number of years ago, I had a Baron crash in a nearby airport here, flying in low visibility, and the pilot lost, spatially disoriented. And that's a situation that certainly the airplane is capable of that. We as the pilot, are we instrument current? Are we good at flying in instrument conditions? Are we good in flying in instrument conditions without the use of automation? How reliant are we on the autopilot? And if the autopilot fails, can we still maintain control just by hand flying the airplane? So a lot of that goes into currency and so forth. But what I try to preach to my students is personal minimums. Just because you can shoot an approach with a 200-foot ceiling does not mean it's necessarily a good idea. You don't really want to operate a Cessna 172 like it's a Boeing 777. Very different airplanes with very different capabilities and limitations. Afternoon flying in the south, where I live here, this is typical. Thunderstorms, they pop up during the afternoon. I grew up in Florida, and it was the same there. You fly in the morning, and a lot of times you can avoid some of the convective weather. So when you're planning a trip, late afternoon, almost evening, or during the morning hours when the instability is not as great. That particular day, there's my data link weather that I'm looking at, and I am you can see the magenta line, and I am just to the right of that magenta line, navigating up toward LaGrange, Georgia, and trying to give myself as much clearance from that thunderstorm as possible, kind of sandwiched between the Atlanta Class B and doing my best to navigate around that thunderstorm. Let me give you a little tidbit here. So you have the data link weather. You know, air traffic control can also be an asset when you have weather going on. And the reason why, are you familiar with the aircraft surveillance radars? We call them the ASR. Aircraft surveillance radar, ASR 9, ASR 11 are the two common ones used now. Those radars actually, besides painting aircraft, they will give a weather depiction on the controller screen. It is in real time. There is no delay on that. So if you hear an approach controller giving you weather information and you're looking at your XM data, that controller is going to have more current data than what you've got there. And I mentioned the visual. As you know, the taller the clouds, the more dangerous they are, because what is going on in that cloud to make that cloud tall? It has updrafts and downdrafts in it. Those updrafts and downdrafts can be moving at 6,000 feet per minute. So they're pretty powerful enough to overstress the airframe of an airplane. The flatter the cloud, the more tame it is. And I have a wife that is a bit adverse to flying into nasty weather. Anything that's a cloud, she's not a big fan of. So the flat ones, I have taught her, I'm like, the flatter it is, we're not going to have a whole lot of bumps. The taller the cloud, of course, that's what you really want to steer clear of, because you do have that tremendous growth of the storm. And sometimes you can actually, you're flying along and you can see how fast and how rapidly those storms are growing and how high they're getting. Certainly for many small airplanes, if you're trying to climb on top of it, it's going to outpace you. So look for the vertical development. The other clouds, not really a big deal. If you're on an IFR flight plan, you just deal with that. Except when there's certainly it's cold and you have icing conditions to worry about. Temperature versus dew point. This is one of the neatest little things ever. Most of you guys know about this. Temperature minus dew point divided by 4.5 times 1,000. That gives you the base of the clouds. So in our example here, 64-degree temperature minus 45-degree dew point. It's going to give you a cloud base of 4,222 feet. Pretty neat. It's basically going back to that temperature and dew point spread. When the temperature and dew point are close together, that is where you have low visibility or at least rain. So as you heat up during the day, the temperature and dew point spread becomes greater and the visibility does increase. And of course, sometimes one of the beauties of having an instrument rating is being able to get above the clouds and deal with this nice smooth layer. VFR on top or VFR over the top, depending on what kind of flight plan you have. That was over the Disney area one day, and this is what we get on an afternoon. You get those stable layer stratus clouds that develop, and you get that layer of clouds, not very thick, very common, not a big deal, nothing to really worry about, nor is this broken cumulus. Again, vertical development. Okay. Let's get into some nitty gritty here. This is a QLCS. I don't know how many of you have heard that term. Squall-Line is kind of the more pedestrian term, but in meteorology, we call it a QLCS, and that is a fancy name. That means quasi-linear convective system. And a QLCS typically fires up ahead of a cold front. And this is often a line that you really can't navigate around. You can get above it if you are in an airplane that, a jet aircraft, or in some cases, some turboprops. Yeah, you certainly don't want to fly underneath it because you're going to deal with possibility of some wind shear and microburst type situations. So QLCS can be a dangerous thing to navigate around. That's what it looks like on radar. So if you are leaving Birmingham and flying to, say, Jackson, Mississippi, Columbus, Mississippi, that is a no-go. And as crazy as it sounds, we've got numerous cases of people that are getting in their airplane, and you're saying, I would never do that. Hopefully not. But there are many people that we have seen in the NTSB reports that have encountered a line like that and went through it. And there's also the case of, well, I've done it before and it was okay. I can do it again. That means perhaps you just got lucky. You do not want to be flying in that kind of environment. If you're heading east toward Atlanta, you're fine. Going to Jackson, Mississippi, Columbus, Tupelo, obviously that is a no-go. Also downdrafts. Thunderstorms can produce these intense downdrafts that we know from the bigger scale for the airline operators. We've seen the cases of what happened in Charlotte with that crash there, and also you had the classic 1985 crash, Dallas-Fort Worth, with Delta Flight 191, the L-1011 that went down on approach into Dallas-Fort Worth. And what happens there with some of those crashes like that, we learn a lot about what's going on. These microbursts, commonly referred to when it's low level like that, is wind shear, the changing of wind direction at low altitude when it switches from a headwind to tailwind, and you're in a low energy state. You'll lose the lift, and you're so close to the ground that you don't recover. We have learned how to avoid those and also how to better recover from those situations now that we know what's going on there. Better radar as well. Anybody familiar with TDWR, Terminal Doppler Weather Radars? The radar systems that have been put in around some of the larger airports, Class B airports. You're going to see that around Dallas, Fort Worth, Atlanta, Charlotte. These are real-time radars that offer even better weather data, and that's what the controllers have access to, those terminal Doppler weather radars as well. You can get access to them as well on some of the mobile apps, and I'll show you that in just a moment. You will not have access to them in the cockpit, though. Towering cumulus clouds, of course, that's where you're going to get a lot of the bumps, a lot of the turbulence, a lot of stuff going on inside those clouds. When they are dark, obviously, they're heavily water loaded. And just so you're clear, when we are seeing a return on radar, we're not seeing clouds, we're seeing precipitation. What the radar is picking up is a return off either water or hail. Sometimes it's even biological things like birds and so forth. But the radar is not giving you a return on clouds. If you ask a controller about clouds, they're not going to be able to see that. They are able to see the returns on radar in terms of precipitation. I've heard on frequency before someone ask a controller about how are the cloud buildups over here, and the best the controller can do is get other pilot reports that have flown through the same area. They're not going to be able to see that on their scope. They detect returns off precipitation, and that's what you're also seeing on XM, or if you're seeing ADSB or a real-time radar. So that's what's going on in a thunderstorm. Looks kind of scary. A lot of stuff happening in there. Could have a tornado on occasion. More than likely, though, you have some intense updrafts and downdrafts, rotation in those. Up at the top of that thunderstorm, you have a little dome. That's an overshooting top where you could have some hail. And those winds could be unbelievably strong, even down low. You can tell which way a thunderstorm is moving. If you look at the anvil of a thunderstorm and you see it elongated, the upper level winds are elongating the top of that thunderstorm, so you can tell if it's moving from west to east and so forth just by visually looking at it. All right, let's talk about data link weather. We've got it on our G1000s. We have it on our 696s and 796s and our iPads. It's all over the place. Awesome stuff. But it can give you a sense of, well, I can just navigate around this, kind of unfortunate sense of comfort and safety. It is not for tactical weather avoidance. So let me explain why. Let me show you what's going on here. These are ground-based radars that you're getting this data from. These ground-based radars are volume scanning radars, the NEXRADs. And they scan from the bottom up to the top. And depending on what mode that radar is in, it may take a 5-minute time period. There are certain modes where it can do it about every 90 seconds, but it could take up upwards of 5 minutes. That radar data is then sent to another facility like Barron in Huntsville. They provide XM weather data, also data here at this television station. And then it has to be uplinked to satellite or the ADSB, the FISB network. So that takes time. So you could be looking at a 10-minute time period of data lag. And it's going to, on my display, it will tell me the age of the data, but it doesn't tell me the age of the transmission, okay? So you could be looking at a 10-minute data lag. What does that mean? Let's say you're going 180 knots in your Bonanza, and the storm's moving at 40 knots. In 10 minutes, you guys are going to be in different places, right? Things happen fast. You're in a fast-moving vehicle, an airplane, and storms are moving along. So what I use this for is when I'm flying along and I look out in front of me and I see, oh, we've got some development down to the south. I use it as a strategy where I can come up with a plan to go around all of it, not the individual cells. The other limitation of this is bandwidth. Excuse me. The bandwidth limits the resolution of the data. When you're looking at radar data like we would look at here at the television station or in some of the higher end weather apps, you're looking at quarter-kilometer data. This is composite data, and I tend to call it blob-o-vision because it's sometimes very pixelated. It just doesn't paint the picture that you need to navigate around storms. That's not to say it's not good. There's just some limitations with it that you need to be aware of. That time delay and also the resolution of it is not as good. It's not going to be able to pick out the little bitty things. Or in some cases, within just a few minutes, you're going to see some intense development of a thunderstorm that maybe wasn't there just a little bit ago. So keep that in mind. And you know, all of us just need to repeat, we will not use data link weather as a means to navigate around individual thunderstorm cells. It is incredibly dangerous to do that. I want you looking at these things with your eyes, okay? Navigating around active weather, you need to have a visual on that unless you have some other tools. And some of the other tools that are available, higher end general aviation airplanes like your Piper Meridians and things like that will have onboard radar. That's in real time. Okay, let's talk about navigating around weather. Look out the window. Data link, Stratus, and XM can get you in trouble. Remember, that data can be as much as 10 minutes old. Use in your strategic planning. ATC radar is live. Use those controllers as a resource. That's a picture of the nose of a citation there with a radar. Radar pans back and forth, okay? And that's a radar display, and you can see some thunderstorm development over there on the right-hand side of the airplane. Keep in mind, this radar, while in real time, also has limitations. These are lower-powered radar units on airplanes. A NEXRAD radar that the National Weather Service uses, the ground-based radars, are 750,000 watts. Many of the television station radars that are operated around 1 million watts with great big antennas. That's a little bitty antenna in the nose of an airplane with a lower powered transmitter. So it's going to suffer attenuation. You probably read about this. You probably even noticed it. If something is in front of that radar beam like rain. It can detect a thunderstorm in front of it, but it might not be able to get that radar signal through that thunderstorm to another one on the other side. So keep that in mind. There was a crash, and you've probably seen this on air disasters. Remember this one? The Southern Airways crash, late 1970s, Huntsville, Alabama, going to Atlanta. Terrible day, lots of severe weather. And they're going over there and they're navigating around this nasty weather. And they've got a radar on board the DC-9. And the radar's suffering some attenuation issues. And they think they're able to navigate around the bad weather, when in turn they end up going into the worst part of the storm. There's hail, it cracks the windscreen of the airplane. The two Pratt Whitney engines ingest all of that hail, and both engines shut down. They end up trying to land on a road, dual flame out. A lot of people are killed as a result of that. They almost had a successful landing, but hit some power lines, and the airplane kind of cartwheeled there. So again, understand the limitations of the onboard radar. ATC radar provides real-time weather data. Again, National Weather Service NEXRAD's delayed from 2 minutes to 5 minutes, depending on the scan, plus the time for processing and satellite delivery. The data could be 10 minutes old, okay? If you don't walk out of here with that in your head this evening, you know, this is the most important thing. Remember, that data is going to be old. Something else I use in my flight planning, forecast models. There's a lot of weather sites out there, and really getting into my head as a meteorologist and how I do my flight planning. I start looking at things days in advance, and I start looking at forecast models. If I'm planning a trip, today is Tuesday, and I'm looking at possibly a trip on Sunday, what I start doing is looking at forecast models. I got a picture there of a bunch of computers and servers, because that's what forecast models are. They are simulations of the atmosphere, what's going to happen in the future. Basically taking the weather information now from weather observations, balloon sounding, satellite, radar, ground reporting stations, and running it in these models that are mathematically and physics intensive, and giving you a result on what's going to happen. And that's what it looks like. That's what a forecast model looks like. It is seeing into the future. That's what we're using to forecast Delta and where that storm's going, these forecast models. This data is available to you as a pilot. In many cases, it's completely free data, and you need to utilize it, because it's going to give you a better handle on, if you're planning a trip a few days away from now, if it's going to be particularly stormy, if it's going to be rainy. And the forecast models certainly are not 100% accurate, but they have gotten good enough that it will give you at least a pretty solid idea if you're going to be dealing with some nasty weather. Or you could even use it in your flight planning and try to grab that tailwind that we never seem to be able to grab. We're great as pilots at getting headwinds, but tailwinds, for whatever reason, we just can't pull that off. Well, with the forecast models, you might be able to do that just a little bit better. With the forecast models too, you can also look at what we call the atmospheric soundings. The weather balloons, they're released twice a day, show these soundings, but you can look at what we call virtual soundings, looking into the future. Look at the temperature, you can look at the dew point, you can see where the freezing layer will develop. If you're flying IMC, you can see where you're going to break out of the clouds. Give you a little example on this one. This is nothing recent, but the red line is your temperature line, the green line is your dew point line. If you were going on a trip and you were wondering, well, where am I going to have my clearing? The clearing on this is going to be probably around 7,000 feet. I can see the temperature and the dew point meet at 850 millibars. That's about 5,000 feet up. As you get closer to 700 millibars, which is roughly 900 or 9,000 feet, that line separates. Remember, the temperature and the dew point not being close together, that is where you're going to have clearing. So it's pretty dry air once you get past about 7,000 or 8,000 feet. So these are great tools to help you better understand where you're going to have some clearing, where you're going to have icing layers, where you're going to have better wind speeds, where you may encounter a headwind. I use it all the time. In fact, I've got a video that I have produced that gives you an idea how to utilize these. Satellite view of storms. Don't disregard the use of satellite. We have two types of satellite data that you can look at. You can look at satellite data on ForeFlight, infrared satellite data, which you have to use during the nighttime, because visible satellite is like a camera on a satellite 24,000 miles up. You're not going to be able to see clouds at night with the visible satellite. That's a visible satellite picture, and it's beautiful. We love visible satellite imagery, but you have to use infrared at night, looking at actually the temperatures of the clouds. With infrared satellite, you can tell if the clouds are cold, the cloud tops are cold. Cold cloud tops are the type of clouds that are producing some thunderstorms. If you have cold cloud tops, you can see that on the infrared satellite information there. So satellite's good. It's also that visible satellite. Here's a little hint. If you're looking for finding the clearing line and you're planning a trip, it's say 9 o'clock in the morning and you're wondering where that clearing is going to be, look at the visible satellite imagery. What's going to happen with the infrared? It's going to be a little convoluted, not be able to show you the clearing line as well, because it's also picking up the temperature of the ground. So remember that. Visible is best in the daytime. Best forecast model sites. You can jot this down. I'm going to leave this up just for a little bit. College of DuPage NEXRAD site, that's out of Chicago. Weather Bell Analytics is fantastic. Does have a little subscription. I think it costs maybe 20 bucks a month, something like that. PivotalWeather.com is one of my favorites. Entirely free. You can get high resolution rapid refresh model. You can get the North American model. You can get some of the medium range models like the GFS. You can also look at the Euro. A lot of information there. You can get the weather soundings as well. So this model data really comes in handy. It can also help you determine if during your period of flight that you could see some thunderstorms, or you could have rain or gusty winds. These are not substitutions for getting a weather briefing, but it can help in your flight planning. Okay. Make sure you have a good weather app, radar app on your smartphone. A lot of these consumer-oriented weather apps or radar apps are just that. They are not intended for people like us that fly airplanes. This app called RadarScope, and I promise you I don't get kickbacks from these folks, it is the best ever app at looking at pure radar data. When I was doing my ATP over at Delta Airlines, I had everybody in that class, and even the Delta 777 pilots. Oh my gosh, this is the coolest app ever. You've got all of the radar products. You've got dual pole products where you can look at icing. You have every level of the radar. It's high resolution data. It's good enough that you could issue warnings off of this, and it comes in very, very fast. Look at the data there. That's not blobo vision. If you zoom into that, you can see everything that you need to see on that storm structure. Fantastic. And if you want to get lightning on it too, there's a little bit of an upcharge, but it has a lot of information. Want to tell you, if you're really into weather and flying, I have a aviation weather video series that I'm constantly contributing to. Love for you to subscribe, click on it. It's called Beyond the Briefing, and I talk about a lot of different things: how to read SKUTs, how to interpret model data, how to prep for your private pilot check ride and understand weather data and understand some of the questions that the examiner is going to be asking you. And these days, the examiners do want to hear that you realize that that data is old in the airplane. That cockpit data could be upwards of 10 minutes old. They also want you to really understand the limitations of radar, and also as a pilot to have those personal minimums, those characteristics in decision making to make those go and no-go decisions. We can teach almost everybody how to fly an airplane. We can't teach everybody how to be a good decision maker, and that's a big part of aviation, is being a good decision maker. So make sure that you're constantly using the best data to prepare for your flights. And it doesn't stop. Once you're in the airplane, constantly keep checking that weather, because weather is always changing. It's always moving, it's always changing, and there's nothing worse than old weather information. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to have me in tonight to talk about weather and aviation, and I think we've saved enough time. We have time for your question too. So I'll let you guys, Paul and Jeremy, kind of moderate the questions. I'll answer the best I can.
All right, JP, thank you again for this outstanding presentation. And real quick, I just wanted to give everybody a vibe of how many folks are dialed into this webcast. Right now, I'm showing 191 folks in the webcast. And also, if you want to go and check out JP's YouTube channel at Beyond the Briefing, he's got some excellent content on there. So go ahead and check that out. I'll go ahead and lead off the first question, JP. Have weather-related accidents decreased with the increase of the amount of onboard weather data?
That's a great question. Now, I haven't done an in-depth study on this, but I can tell you just from anecdotal evidence of being in the TV news business, I don't see that it has. I see many, many airplane crashes as a result of something that is weather related. So I'd love to say I think it has, but I don't think it has.
Cool. Awesome. Well, JP, I have to echo what a lot of people have said. We could do this for like 15 hours and be totally fine with it. The information we're putting out is absolutely spectacular, right? So, so thank you so much. But so one of the big questions is, you know, on like ForeFlight as an example, we have convective outlook and convective, and a lot of times if you compare that to like FlightAware, you know, you see a lot of aircraft that are out flying around. What do you personally look for? And granted, I mean, level of experience is going to be a little bit different, right? And being a meteorologist, but what primarily do you use in order to actually you know, make that go no go decision?
Well, you know, especially with my background as being a meteorologist, I do rely a lot on looking at the model data and looking at some of the severe weather parameters within that model data. So that does help me. But if a person is not well versed on being a forecaster, we can't expect every airplane pilot to be a meteorologist or have that depth of knowledge. What you do need to look at, some of the go-tos, obviously the easy ones, the TAFs, and it doesn't hurt. Turn on your local TV news and see what the weather person there is talking about on that given day, or maybe the next day. That's going to give you some idea. You're talking about the convective outlooks, and those are issued by the Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma. That's also good for giving you an idea of where those zones of convective weather are going to be. Those are divided into a marginal risk, a slight risk. You have enhanced, moderate, and high risk. Obviously, high risk and moderate and enhanced, those are really no-go areas that you would want to fly in. But keep in mind, even in those places, there's going to be a time range where it's going to be active and a time prior to when the activity starts. So you need to get a good handle on when that's going to happen. Certainly, even marginal days are, and I'm talking about the convective outlook, the marginal days where it may not be so bad on the ground could be a no-go for smaller aircraft. Not so much the airlines, but smaller aircraft, it would probably be a no-go. And also look at the radar. Get yourself a good weather radar app and see what's happening out there, and look at what's happening to the west of you, where that weather may be coming in. That's going to give you a good idea of what is going to take place during your time of travel, so you don't launch out into something. Nothing frustrates me more than when I see some thunderstorms out there and I see somebody take off into it, and then you read about they had a crash or a fatal crash, and it's like, gosh, this was out here when you left. Did you not look? I was on a flight coming back from Florida, and the guy's on the radio, and he's talking to controllers out of Tallahassee, and he's constantly saying, I need vectors around this, and it's just a heinous weather day. I just kind of shot off to the west and ran around all of it, and the controller finally said to the guys, like, hey, did you not even look at the weather before you took off, kind of jokingly? And I was wondering the same thing myself.
Gotcha. All right. Jeremy, go ahead.
JP, what is your recommendation on setting safe, expanding personal minimums?
Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of that's going to be based on what kind of aircraft you're in, and it's going to be based on pilot experience. Certainly, when I was less experienced, those personal minimums were a lot higher. But your personal minimums, if you're in a turboprop versus a single engine, you know, Piper Cherokee or something, those minimums are going to be different. If you are brand new to flying versus someone that's been flying for years, and I'm going to get back to that in just a second. Somebody that's been flying for years may be a little bit different. That said, what we do find out, there's kind of a sweet spot where you find sometimes people that have been flying for years will have filed away all these times they've flown in bad weather or some kind of bad circumstance where they maybe have gotten lucky and they end up doing something. Remember the crash a number of years ago? One of the most famous pilots in the world, Scott Crossfield, died when he flew a single engine Cessna into a thunderstorm. And I mean, historically, one of the finest pilots ever to fly an airplane. So personal minimums, I always tell my students, if you're an instrument pilot, make sure when you break out, you can, if you had an engine failure, assuming you're in a single engine airplane, that you can easily be able to navigate to a safe spot, whether at a road, a field, or an airport. If you break out at 200 feet, there's not much time to do anything. You're going to be hitting something, and you may not know what it is. So be conservative with your flying. It keeps you out of trouble. I mean, there may be some no-go days, but we like to live to fly another day. There's an old saying, I would rather be wishing I was in the sky than in the sky wishing I was on the ground.
Yes, that is true. That is very true. How fast do squall lines typically move? I know that's probably a harder question to ask, but as a meteorologist, is there like a typical speed?
Yeah. Your typical is going to be between 30 and let's say about 30 knots. About 30 knots, close to 40 miles per hour. I've seen them race along faster than that, but that's kind of the sweet spot for them. About close to 40 miles per hour. They usually are fairly quick moving. They're, on occasion, if you have winds paralleling a squall line, it will slow it down, but most of the time that is not the case. Great question.
Jeremy, go ahead.
JP, we're a large majority of the folks that are dialed in are in the South, and it's early October. What are some tips that you can think of as a pilot and a meteorologist to think of as we move into those winter months? Mm-hmm. And if you're in Texas and you're going to fly to, say, Maine.
Yeah, of course, now we start having to think about icing. We have to think about the freezing layers, and that is, of course, a concern. Many of the airplanes that we fly have no ice protection, and those that do perhaps have a TKS system or something like that, which is fine. But remember, that's a finite amount of de-ice fluid in there. It's not like boots or a heated wing like you would find in the larger airplanes. So icing is bad stuff. And even there's cases a few years ago, the TBM crash up around New Jersey, where the icing overcame the boots. So even airplanes that are pretty well protected for ice can be overwhelmed by it. Not to mention, it's not only icing, but we see some pretty significant convective weather during the winter months. In fact, here in the Southeast, we call it our fall and winter severe weather season. In my 25 years of doing weather, I've had a lot of tornadoes that I've covered in November and December, and a lot of squall lines that have moved through. So keep that in mind. Just because it's a cool season doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to have some pretty serious convective weather. It's not just the spring and summer that you see convective weather, so keep that in mind. But on top of that, you're going to be looking at the possibility of flying into areas as you go farther north. In your case, your example, you were using Maine. As you go farther north, that freezing layer is going to be dropping. So in some cases, it's going to be a no-go for an airplane like a Piper Cherokee or a Cessna 172, some of our common single-engine aircraft.
Cool. Awesome. Some of the, we read different articles and talking to some of the different air traffic controllers, and they're making kind of the same comments that the center's radar has the same lag time as an ADSB. Do you have any idea on that and why?
Yeah, center's radar is going to be different than the approach radar. They're using, I believe, the warp system in the center's radar. Approach control is using the ASR radars, the aircraft surveillance radars. So you're going to have more of a lag with center versus you would have with a typical approach control or a TRACON. And that's one of those things you have to bear in mind when navigating around the thunderstorms, that they may suffer somewhat of a lag, because they will not have as much of a lag, because it's not going to have the transmission issues that we have with the airplane, but you're still going to have the volume scan of the radars, which could be upwards of 5 minutes compared, or in a severe weather mode, it may be around 90 seconds.
All right. Hey, here's a good question for all our GA pilots: is the signs of the onset of fog. And we hear about it with the temperature dew point spread, but can you elaborate a little bit more in depth on that?
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, of course, I start thinking about the problems of visibility the night before, typically. And you don't see a whole lot of fog. There's cases where you do. Fog is not typically a midday or an afternoon type situation. It's usually night or early morning as the temperature and dew point come together. Fog, most of the fog that we deal with, unless you're in a coastal area, is going to be radiation fog. Clear sky, calm wind, maybe a wet ground, and the temperature cooling down to the dew point during the overnight. And that is going to give you the visibility issues. Some of the problems that we have around here is maybe an airport is next to a lake and you'll get steam fog or something like that, and it will advect over the airport. So sometimes you have to, the geography of the given airport is going to be a factor as well. One of the airports nearby where I had an airplane base for years, every morning you could almost count on a fog layer. It would be visibility less than a mile and a 100-foot ceiling because the fog had moved in over the lake. That was inspiration for me early on. I said, I got to get an instrument rating, not because I want to take off a 0 visibility, but a lot of times you would still have a low deck of clouds even after that.
So that actually brings us right into our next question, which is an outstanding question. With your students and you personally, right, how do you recommend setting and safely expanding personal minimums?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. And a lot of that is going to be, what's the frequency of your flying? What ratings do you have? I often tell people the instrument rating is a rating that allows you to legally kill yourself, because it opens up a lot of opportunity for VFR. Is pretty easy most of the time. You just look at it, it's like, oh man, I can't fly today. With IFR, you can, especially if you're Part 91. It could be totally fogged in and you could decide to leave, which is not what we suggest. So I tell people, I said, at the very least, always give yourself a backup plan, some way out. Never box yourself in, never get into a situation where you can't land. Also look at if you're taking off and you're in a single engine aircraft, if that engine goes out and you've entered IMC, is that ceiling high enough for you to get back down safely? Otherwise, you're going to have a problem. Murphy's Law says the engine's going to fail at the lowest visibility. That's just the way it tends to go. But be careful with the personal minimums. And how current are you? Do you fly a lot? Or are you a person that goes out? You know, I know some folks that every 3 or 4 weeks, they'll go around and putter around the pattern. If you're flying every single day and you're shooting approaches and you're taking trips and you're going places, you're going to be pretty current. And another thing that will get you in trouble, I think, is if you're in a technologically advanced airplane, understand the automation in that airplane. Don't be in IMC trying to fumble around and not knowing how something works. Always know what the airplane is doing, what the airplane is going to be doing next. Be proficient with whatever automation that you have on board the airplane.
All right, JP, I really want to appreciate your time tonight again. And I know that you got to get ready to go live on the air here in about 30 minutes. So I wanted to give you the final word before we close this out.
All right. Thank you very much, Jeremy. And really what I want to leave you with is, let's not be an NTSB report. This is all about risk mitigation. And before we ever get up in the air, we have the opportunity to eliminate, unlike I tell people when they're driving a car, a lot of the risks are out of your hands. With an airplane, many of the risks are controlled by you. You can decide whether to fly or not, where to fly, where to land. Really think that through, and don't take it lightly. If there is no trip important enough to kill yourself over, or your family. A lot of times, you know, you read these reports and it's kids and wives and husbands, you know, it's family members in there going somewhere, and they got into something they should have never gotten into. So let's not do that. Let's do everything in our power to reduce that happening. If not, in fact, let's just not let it happen, because I think this day and age, we are blessed to have a lot of technology and a lot of science at our fingertips to eliminate that and really just keep from breaking that chain.
Thank you so much, JP.
You bet.
All right. With that being said, guys, I want everybody to give JP a round of applause in the chat if we can. I really appreciate him coming on, taking his time to contribute his expertise to this event tonight. It was outstanding, JP. And I want to thank everybody who has continued to support this program, who's been very loyal in supporting this program. It's going to continue to grow. We had almost 200 people. I didn't get the final stats until later, but it's awesome. I had a couple of questions during the presentation about the Wings credit code and the Wings credit from the last webinar. And we had quite a few in the last webinar, just like this one. And I'm trying a little different uploading technique. So it takes a little longer. So we're working out the kinks in the system, but you all who participated in the last webcast will get Wings credit. It's just a matter of me figuring out the details with that. If you registered and you are in the webcast tonight, I will be able to grant you the Wings credit. And if you're viewing this from either Facebook Live or when this goes live on YouTube in a couple of days, punch in that code 5645 and I can grant you Wings credit. And send me an email at flyallamerican@gmail.com with any kind of feedback that you may or may not have, or just tell me what you think about the program. Follow All American Aviation on YouTube, Instagram, and on Facebook. And go ahead and give Beyond the Brief a subscribe so that you can get good insight from JP. So we're going to keep doing these webcasts right on. This thing is just cranking up, and it's a lot of amazing things are happening with it. And we're going above and beyond where I ever imagined it would go from that moment that I had brisket at Cooper's to the very first webcast back in April. So join us on October the 20th at 7:30 p.m. for, you'll just have to wait, our mystery guest, 2 weeks from tonight. From Paul, JP, and myself, have a wonderful Tuesday evening. Failure is not an option. Gene Kranz. Fly safe, keep learning, and never give up on a dream. So long.